The light arrives first not as a declaration, but as a whisper. It is a soft, pearlescent grey that begins to separate the deep indigo of the sea from the velvet black of the sky over the Bay of Naples. It touches the peak of the great mountain first, the one the people of this coast call Vesuvius, tracing its familiar, gentle slope against the heavens. To the city of Pompeii, nestled in its fertile shadow, the mountain is a guardian, a constant, looming presence that anchors the landscape and gives richness to the soil. On this morning, as on countless mornings before, it is a symbol of permanence, its green flanks soon to be gilded by the rising sun. Down in the sleeping city, the air is cool and still, heavy with the scent of night-blooming jasmine, damp earth, and the distant, briny tang of the Sarno River meeting the sea. The silence is not absolute. It is a living quiet, punctuated by the far-off crowing of a rooster, the restless stamp of a horse in its stable, or the soft, mournful braying of a donkey. These are the sounds of a city breathing in its sleep, a vast organism on the cusp of waking. The first true signs of life emanate from pockets of intense, localized heat. In the pre-dawn dark, a different kind of warmth pushes back against the cool air. It is the humid, flour-dusted heat of the pistrinum, the bakery. Here the day began not with fire, but with the embers of yesterday's labor. The great brick ovens, still radiating a fierce residual warmth, cast a flickering orange glow on the bare, muscular arms of slaves. Their movements are a rhythmic, practiced dance. The grinding of spelt and wheat in the heavy stone mills, each turned by a patient donkey, or a pair of strong men circling in the dimness. The air is thick with the scent of raw grain, and the faint smokiness of the ovens being stoked back to life. Soon the rhythmic slap and fold of dough will begin, a sound that is as fundamental to Pompeii's morning as the sunrise itself. These men, often of low status, are the first architects of the city's day, preparing the simple, essential sustenance that will fuel thousands. In the grand villas of the wealthy, sprawling homes built around open-air atriums and walled gardens, another, quieter stirring is underway. Here, the first to move are also the unseen. Slaves glide through the darkened corridors, their bare feet making no sound on the intricate mosaic floors. Their tasks are precise and timeless, trimming the wicks of the oil lamps and coaxing a gentle flame to life, clearing the embers from the bronze braziers, and laying out the master's tunic and toga. In the kitchen, a slave will be coaxing a fire in the hearth, preparing for the modest morning meal, the intaculum. In the house of the faun, a residence of immense size and opulence, a young slave girl might be carefully sweeping the mosaic of Alexander the Great, a small broom brushing over the epic battle scene, a universe of chaos and glory captured in tiny stones, all before the master of the house has even stirred. As the sky brightens from grey to a soft, ethereal blue, the light spills over the city walls. It catches the terracotta roof tiles, still slick with morning dew, making them gleam like a carpet of burnished copper. It streams into the atriums of the domus, the homes of the elite, illuminating the central pool, the impluvium, designed to catch rainwater. The light dances on the surface of the water, casting rippling reflections onto the vibrantly painted frescoes that adorn the walls. Here scenes of mythology, ethereal landscapes, and intimate portraits watch over the waking household. The paterfamilias, the head of the family, rises. His morning ritual is one of dignity and duty. He dresses with the help of a slave, wrapping himself in the simple tunic of daily life. Before any business is conducted, before any food is taken, he approaches the household shrine, the lararium. It might be a simple painted niche in the wall or an elaborate temple-like structure. Here he offers a prayer and a small token, a pinch of salted flour, a drop of wine, to the lares, the guardian spirits of the family, and to the genius, the spirit of his own lineage. It is a moment of quiet communion, reinforcing his place in the cosmos and the sacred duty he holds to protect his household. Now, the city's pulse begins to quicken. The heavy wooden shutters of the shops, the tabani, are unbarred and folded down, their lower halves forming counters that open directly onto the street. From the Via della Bendanza, the city's main commercial artery, to the smaller side streets, a symphony of commerce begins. A fuller opens his workshop, the air already smelling faintly of sulfur and urine, used in the cleaning of woolen cloth. The clanging of a hammer on an anvil rings out from a blacksmith's forge, sharp and clear in the morning air. A potter settles at his wheel, his hands wet with clay, ready to shape the amphory that will carry Pompeii's famous wine and garum fish sauce to the far corners of the Roman world. The streets themselves begin to fill. They are paved with large, irregular blocks of vesicular lava, worn smooth by generations of footsteps and the rumble of iron-rimmed cart wheels. High sidewalks line the main thoroughfares, keeping pedestrians above the muck and water that would flow through the streets. To cross, one uses the large, raised stepping stones, a uniquely Pompeian feature, placed at intersections to allow people to pass from one side to the other without soiling their sandals. It is at the public fountains that the city's social life truly blossoms. Pompeii is a city of water, fed by the Aqua Augusta aqueduct. Dozens of public fountains, each carved with the head of a god, a gorgon, or a theatrical mask, gush with a constant supply of fresh water. Here all classes of society mingle. A slave girl from a wealthy villa, sent to fetch the purest water for her mistress, balances a clay jug on her shoulder. A shopkeeper's son splashes his face, laughing with his friends. An old woman, her back bent with age, fills her vessel, her movements slow and deliberate. It is a place of gossip, of news, of arguments and flirtations. The murmur of voices, the splash of water, the clatter of clay and bronze jugs create a vibrant, essential chorus. Breakfast for most Pompeians is a simple affair. The wealthy patrician, having completed his morning rituals, now prepares for the salutatio, the morning reception where his clients and dependents will come to pay their respects and seek favor. He might break his fast on a piece of bread dipped in wine, or perhaps some dates and cheese, often taken while standing. For the common worker, the artisan, or the slave, breakfast is functional. A piece of coarse bread, bought for a single copper coin from a baker's stall, is the most common meal. They might buy it still warm from the oven, its crust hard and its inside dense. For something more substantial, many head to a thermopolium, the ancient equivalent of a fast food counter. These establishments are everywhere in Pompeii, easily identified by their distinctive L-shaped masonry counters with large earthenware jars or dolia set directly into the surface. These jars held hot and cold foods, lentils, spice stews, cheeses and roasted nuts. The proprietor would ladle a simple, warming meal into a bowl for a customer to eat on the go or while standing at the counter. The smell of simmering chickpeas, roasting meat, and mulled wine begins to drift into the street, mingling with the scent of baking bread and the sharper smells of industry. The sun is higher now, a warm, golden presence that banishes the last of the morning chill. The light floods the forum, the vast, open plaza that serves as the city's civic, religious, and commercial heart. Although the main business of the day has not yet begun, the space is already filling with people. Priests in their ceremonial robes make their way towards the Temple of Jupiter, which dominates the northern end of the square. Magistrates and city officials converse in small groups, their voices echoing in the expansive space. Merchants set up temporary stalls, preparing to sell everything from exotic spices and fine Egyptian cotton to locally produced pottery and glassware. The Forum is the city's grand stage, and the actors are taking their places for the day's performance. Children's voices can be heard, their laughter echoing in the narrow alleyways. Some are on their way to a school, a simple affair often held in a rented room or the corner of a public portico, where they will learn to read, write, and master basic arithmetic by scratching letters onto wax tablets with a stylus. Others are already at play, chasing stray dogs or rolling hoops down the sloped streets. Their presence is a testament to the city's vitality, a generation growing up under the watchful eye of Vesuvius, knowing no other life. The air itself is now a complex tapestry of smells. The sweet aroma of bread from the 50 bakeries, the sharp scent of fermenting fish from the garum factories near the port, the delicate perfume of olive oil, the earthy smell of livestock being led to market, and the faint, ever-present scent of incense drifting from 1,000 household shrines. And beneath it all, the hum of life. It is the sound of thousands of individual stories converging into a single, unified narrative. The shuffle of sandals on stone, the murmur of Latin mixed with the Greek of traders, and the dialects of slaves from across the empire. The creak of a shop sign swinging in the sea breeze, the distant rhythm of a cooper hammering a barrel into shape. This is the morning of an ordinary day in Pompeii, a day of labor, of commerce, of family, and of faith. The city is a marvel of Roman engineering and a crucible of culture, confident and prosperous. As the sun climbs towards its zenith, casting sharp shadows across the bustling streets, there is no sense of an ending. There is only the familiar, comforting rhythm of life as it has always been, unfolding in the warm, fertile shadow of the great mountain. The city is awake, vibrant, and utterly unaware that the guardian on the horizon is, for the first time in centuries, beginning to stir in its long slumber. The earth has offered no significant warning, the sky gives no sign. There is only the light, the sounds, and the smells of a city in its prime, living out the final, precious hours of its last morning. As the sun completes its ascent, pausing at the zenith of the sky, the character of Pompeii shifts. The frenetic energy of the morning, a frantic rush of setting up and starting out, settles into the steady, powerful rhythm of a city at the peak of its daily labor. The heat, no longer a gentle warmth, becomes a dominant presence, a heavy, shimmering blanket that radiates from the dark lava stones of the street and presses down from a sky of brilliant, cloudless blue. This is the heart of the day, the long, working hours of the afternoon when the city's true purpose, commerce, craft and law, is most fully expressed. The Forum, which had been a stage for morning greetings, is now an arena of full-throated business. At the southwestern corner, the great basilica hums with the complex machinery of Roman law. Inside the cavernous, high-roofed hall, supported by a forest of imposing columns, justice is a public performance. A magistrate, seated on a raised tribunal, listens with a practiced air of solemnity as an orator argues a case of disputed inheritance. The lawyer's voice, trained for projection, fills the space, his arms gesticulating dramatically to emphasize a point of law or cast doubt on a witness's testimony. A crowd of onlookers gathers, some personally invested in the outcome, others simply drawn to the daily drama. They stand along the colonnades, their murmurs a constant counterpoint to the formal proceedings, a reminder that law here is not an abstract concept, but a powerful, tangible force that shapes fortunes and determines fates. Across the sprawling plaza, the Mausoleum, the city's central market, is a riot of color, sound and smell. Fishermen who brought their catch in from the bay at dawn now display it on cool marble slabs. Silver scales of mackerel, red-fleshed tuna, and baskets of wriggling eels and shellfish create a glistening, pungent mosaic. A special basin in the center of the market's courtyard, once used for live fish, has been cleaned and is now empty, awaiting its next delivery. In the stalls that ring the courtyard, vendors call out their prices. Merchants sell plump figs and peaches grown in the fertile orchards that surround the city, their sweetness perfuming the air. Butchers cleave cuts of pork and lamb, the thud of their blades a rhythmic beat in the market symphony. Here, a wealthy matron's slave carefully selects the finest produce for the evening meal, the cena, while a tavern owner haggles loudly over a cask of olives. It is a microcosm of Pompeii's economy, a vibrant intersection of local agriculture and the daily needs of the populace. Deeper within the city's labyrinthine streets, the workshops are filled with the sweat and noise of peak production. In the fuller's shop, slaves and workers tread rhythmically in vats filled with a mixture of water, alkali, and human urine, the ammonia acting as a powerful cleansing agent for woolen togas. The pungent smell, so characteristic of these establishments, is a familiar part of the urban landscape. The cleaned cloth is then stretched on large wicker frames to dry, and brushed to raise the nap, a labor-intensive process that produces the brilliant white togas prized by the Roman elite. Elsewhere, the steady clack-clack-clack of the weaver's loom provides a hypnotic rhythm, as intricate patterns are born from threads of dyed wool. In the house of the Vetii, a residence of two wealthy merchant brothers, the work is of a different kind. In a back room, a clerk painstakingly updates a ledger, his stylus scratching against a wax tablet, recording shipments of wine sent to Rome and noting payments received. The entire city is a hive of purposeful activity, each citizen, freedman and slave playing their part in an intricate, interdependent economic web. And yet, it is in this moment of supreme, confident normalcy that the first, almost imperceptible, dissonant notes are struck. A faint tremor lasting only a second runs through the earth. It is a common enough occurrence in this volcanic region, a land that the Romans called Campania Felix, the fortunate countryside, for its incredible fertility, a gift of the very seismic activity that now makes it shudder. In the basilica, a hanging bronze lamp sways gently. In a potter's shop, a stack of freshly thrown cups rattles, but does not fall. People pause. A brief, questioning glance is exchanged between the orator and the magistrate. A shopper in the Mausoleum steadies herself. Then, the moment passes. The tremor is gone. With a collective shrug, the city resumes its work. These small earthquakes have been more frequent since the great one of 62 AD, the one that had so badly damaged the city. Rebuilding is still underway from that disaster. Scaffolding still clings to the side of the Temple of Isis. This new tremor is dismissed as just another aftershock, another groan from a restless earth that they have long learned to live with. The afternoon is also the time for leisure and the care of the body, a central pillar of Roman culture. The city's great bath complexes, the Stabian baths, the Forum baths, and the Central baths, are hives of social activity. For the price of a small copper coin, a citizen can enter a world dedicated to health, relaxation, and conversation. A man might first enter the palaestra, an open-air courtyard to exercise. Here men engage in wrestling, weightlifting with stone dumbbells or games of ball. The sounds of exertion, the grunts of wrestlers, and the shouts of men playing trigone, a fast-paced triangular ball game, echo in the warm air. Sweating from their exercise, they move into the bath block itself, a carefully orchestrated journey through rooms of increasing heat. They leave their clothes in niches in the apoditerium, the changing room, a space often decorated with light-hearted, sometimes erotic, frescoes. From there, they proceed to the tepidarium, a warm room that serves as an antechamber to acclimatize the body. Here, men lounge on benches, their skin glistening with oil, and engage in conversation. Business deals are struck, political gossip is exchanged, and philosophies are debated in the humid, echoing space. Then it is on to the caldarium, the hot room, heated by the ingenious hypocaust system, where hot air from a furnace circulates under the floor and through the walls. The air is thick with steam. Bathers sweat profusely, opening their pores. A slave or a friend might use a strigil, a curved metal scraper, to remove the mixture of oil, sweat, and dirt from the skin, a vigorous and cleansing ritual. The final stop is a bracing, shocking plunge into the cold water of the frigidarium, a shock to the system that closes the pores and invigorates the spirit. It is here, in the Stabian baths, that another subtle anomaly occurs. The fountain in the Palaestra, which has gushed water relentlessly for years, suddenly sputters. The arc of water falters, becoming a trickle, before resuming its full flow a moment later. A few of the exercising men notice. It is odd. The Aqua Augusta aqueduct is a masterpiece of engineering, a symbol of Rome's power to tame nature. Its failure, even for a moment, is unsettling, but the moment passes. The water flows again. The incident is forgotten, submerged beneath the comforting and familiar rituals of the bath. As the afternoon wears on, a strange, faint smell occasionally drifts on the breeze from the north, from the direction of Vesuvius. It is not the familiar city smell of wood smoke, baking bread, or the foulness of the fulleries. It is a sharper, more mineral scent, like sulfur or struck flint. It is thin and elusive, disappearing as quickly as it comes. One might mistake it for the stench of a blocked drain or some industrial process. It is not yet alarming, merely a faint, unusual scent in the complex olfactory palate of the city. The birds, however, seem to notice. A flock of sparrows that had been chattering on the roof of the Temple of Apollo suddenly falls silent, and in a unified, agitated cloud, takes flight, wheeling away towards the sea. A dog, sleeping in a patch of shade in a doorway, lifts its head and lets out a low, mournful whine for no apparent reason, before settling back down with a sigh. The hottest part of the day, immediately after the midday meal, or prandium, brings a customary lull. This is the hour of the siesta. The relentless sun drives those who can afford it indoors. The large wooden shutters of the shops are closed and barred. The relentless hammering and clatter from the workshop ceases. The streets, so recently teeming with life, become quiet and strangely empty, populated only by a few stray dogs and the hardiest of travelers. The city holds its breath. Inside the villas, families retreat to the peristyle, the shaded colonnaded gardens at the rear of their homes. Here, surrounded by the murmur of a small fountain, the scent of roses and herbs, and the shade of grapevines, they rest. The light filters softly through the colonnades, painting stripes across mosaic floors. Some sleep, others talk in low voices. It is a time of profound peace, the final, deep, collective moment of tranquility the city will ever know. The silence is broken only by the buzzing of bees in the garden, and the distant, muffled sounds of those whose labor never ceases. As the sun begins its slow descent towards the horizon, the city gradually reawakens from its slumber. The siesta ends, shutters are unbarred and the sounds of commerce return, though perhaps with less vigor than before. This is the time when the bathhouses reach their peak capacity, as workers, finished with their day's labor, seek refreshment. The taverns and cookshops do a brisk trade, serving wine and simple meals to the evening crowds. People stroll through the porticos of the Forum, enjoying the relative cool of the late afternoon. Life resumes its familiar, comforting patterns, but the great mountain to the north is no longer a passive, green backdrop. A discerning eye, looking up at its peak, might notice that the usual wisp of steam that sometimes hangs over the summit has changed. It is thicker now and darker, a column of greyish-brown smoke that curls into the pristine blue sky with a slow, deliberate force. It is not yet a terrifying plume, not the black cloud of legend, but it is different. It looks less like the breath of the mountain, and more like smoke from a vast, unseen fire. A farmer working in a vineyard on the lower slopes might pause, leaning on his hoe, and stare at it for a long moment, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. A sailor on a ship in the bay might point it out to his crewmate. In the city, a child might ask his father what that strange cloud is. The signs have been subtle, fleeting, and easily dismissed. A tremor, a faltering fountain, a strange smell. Unsettled animals. But now, as the final hours of calm tick away, the shadow of the volcano is beginning to lengthen, and it carries with it a visible, undeniable portent, a dark question mark hanging over a city that is still, for now, bathed in the golden light of its last afternoon. The late afternoon peace, so recently reclaimed from the siesta's lull, is not destined to last. It is shattered by a sound for which there is no precedent, no name in the collective memory of the city. It is not the familiar shudder of an earth tremor, nor is it the sharp crack of thunder. It is a deafening, concussive roar that seems to come from all directions at once, from the sky above, the sea beyond, and most terrifyingly, from the very foundations of the earth beneath their feet. It is a sound that is felt as much as it is heard, a deep, visceral vibration that travels through the soles of the feet, up the spine, and into the teeth. In an instant, every other sound in Pompeii is annihilated. The chatter of the forum, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the laughter of children, all are swallowed by this single, monstrous report. Every head snaps northward toward the source. What they see is an apparition, a spectacle so profoundly unnatural that for a few precious seconds, fear is held at bay by sheer, paralyzing disbelief. The entire peak of Vesuvius has vanished, blown away by a force beyond human comprehension. In its place, a column of unimaginable scale is ascending into the heavens. It rises with a silent, terrifying velocity, a churning pillar of gas, pulverized rock, and white-hot ash. It is a sight of terrible, sublime beauty. The base of the column is a maelstrom of dark, roiling grey and black, thick with the Earth's fury. But as it punches higher and higher into the stratosphere, miles into the sky, it expands and whitens, catching the afternoon sun and looking, as the young Pliny would later write from his vantage point across the bay at Misenum, for all the world like a gigantic Mediterranean pine tree. It had a trunk of immense height, which then spread out at its top into a vast, branching canopy. For a long moment, the city is frozen. People stand motionless in the streets, in doorways, in the open courtyards of their homes, their faces upturned in collective awe. In the amphitheater, a group of gladiators training in the yard stops mid-swing, their wooden practice swords held aloft, their powerful bodies still as statues. In the forum baths, bathers dripping with water emerge into the courtyard, their conversations about commerce and politics forgotten, to stare at the impossible vision dominating the sky. The initial reaction is not panic, but a profound, questioning wonder. This is not in their understanding of the world. The gods sent lightning bolts and caused earthquakes, but this was something new, something elemental and terrifyingly grand. Priests may have looked to the sky for an omen, a sign from Jupiter, but the sky itself was being unwritten. Then, the second phase begins. The great pine tree in the sky, having reached its apex, begins to spread, its colossal canopy unfurling like a stain across the perfect blue. And from this canopy, things begin to fall. At first, it is just a fine grey powder, a delicate, gritty snowfall that dusts the shoulders and hair. It is accompanied by a gentle rain of small, feather-light stones of a greyish-white colour. This is lapilli, or pumice, rock so filled with trapped gas that it is lighter than water. People brush it away, confused. A child might catch one of the porous stones, marvelling at its lack of weight. The initial danger seems minimal, more of a bizarre inconvenience than a true threat. This is the moment of the great, fatal miscalculation. Many believed it to be a passing phenomenon, a strange storm that would soon blow over. The most logical response seemed to be to seek shelter. People retreated from the streets, going back into their shops, their homes, their workshops. They barred the doors and shuttered the windows, seeking the comfort of the familiar. It was a choice born of a desire for security, to put a solid roof between themselves and the increasingly strange world outside. They gathered their families, lit oil lamps against a subtly dimming sky, and they waited. Others, however, felt a deeper, more primal instinct, to flee. A debate, spoken and unspoken, rippled through the city. To go or to stay, husbands argued with wives, parents had to decide the fate of their children. To abandon a home, a business, everything you owned, based on a strange cloud and some falling pebbles, seemed an act of madness. But to stay, with that monstrous, roaring apparition hanging over the city, felt like tempting a fate one could not yet name. The decision was soon made for them. The gentle rain of ash and light pumice intensified, becoming a relentless, percussive bombardment. The pumice stones grew larger, some the size of walnuts, then lemons, then fists. They fell not like snow, but like a hail of solid rock, thudding against wooden shutters, clattering on terracotta tiles, and striking those still caught in the open with painful, bruising force. The noise was now a constant, terrifying din, the ceaseless, deep-throated roar of the volcano, like 1,000 furnaces, overlaid with the high-pitched hiss and rattle of millions of falling stones. Some resourceful individuals, remembering the account of Pliny, tied pillows to their heads with cloth for protection as they attempted to navigate the streets, a desperate, flimsy shield against the hard rain from the sky. And then came the darkness. The vast canopy of the eruption column, spreading outwards, began to eclipse the sun. The brilliant light of a Campanian afternoon faded with terrifying speed, not into the gentle twilight of evening, but into a thick, premature night. Within an hour of the first explosion, the city was plunged into an unnatural, oppressive blackness. It was a darkness more profound than any night, for it was starless, moonless, and filled with a constant, choking dust. Panic, which had been a scattered, individual emotion, now became a citywide contagion. The sight of the sun being swallowed whole broke the last vestiges of composure. The world had turned inside out. Day had become night. The sky was falling. The solid earth was the source of the chaos. The flight began in earnest. The ordered streets of Pompeii dissolved into a maelstrom of terror. The carefully laid stepping stones, designed for navigating puddles, now became treacherous obstacles in the dark, tripping the fleeing and creating piles of fallen bodies. People streamed from their houses, their faces streaked with grey dust, their eyes wide with fear. The darkness was punctuated only by the flickering, uncertain light of torches and oil lamps, casting long, dancing shadows that made the scene even more phantasmagorical. Shouts echoed through the streets, people calling the names of lost family members, their voices hoarse with desperation and the choking ash. Families were torn apart in the crush. A mother holding the hands of 2 children might lose her grip on one in the surging crowd, her cries of anguish swallowed by the greater noise. The city's gates became deadly bottlenecks. The Herculaneum gate to the north, leading toward Naples, and the Stabian gate to the south, were choked with a desperate tide of humanity. The wealthy, who had waited too long, tried to force their way through, with slaves carrying strongboxes filled with coins and precious jewelry, their social authority now meaningless in the face of universal terror. Carts hastily loaded with belongings became entangled, their wheels stuck, blocking the path for the hundreds pushing from behind. The sounds of splintering wood, the panicked braying of a donkey, and the furious, terrified shouts of the trapped filled the archways of the gates. Some chose a different route, running west, towards the sea gate and the port, hoping that ships might offer a chance of salvation. But the sea itself was in turmoil, agitated by the seismic shocks, its waters churning and receding in strange ways. Not everyone fled. Many remained, trapped by indecision, duty, or love. In the house of the Menander, a group of people huddled in a small room beneath the staircase, hoping the solid structure would protect them, waiting for the storm to pass. In the gladiators' barracks, some of these formidable fighters, men who faced death for sport, were found in their cells, some with their wealthy female admirers, perhaps believing their own strength or the solid walls of their quarters offered safety. An elderly couple, unable to face the terrifying flight through the streets, simply lay down on their bed to meet their end together. A priest may have remained in his temple, praying to gods who seemed to have abandoned their city, placing his faith in the sanctity of his shrine. For thousands, the decision to shelter indoors became a death sentence. The environmental impact was catastrophic. The pumice, falling relentlessly for hours, began to accumulate. On the streets it piled up in deep grey drifts, making movement slow and exhausting, like wading through coarse, heavy snow. But the true danger was above. Roman roofs, often flat or gently sloped, with heavy timber beams and terracotta tiles, were not designed to withstand such a load. The weight of the falling pumice grew with every passing moment, tons of it pressing down on the city's structures. Soon, a new sound was added to the terrifying symphony, the sharp, groaning crack of a straining wooden beam, followed by the deafening crash of a collapsing roof. Entire buildings imploded, their roofs and upper floors giving way, burying dozens of people alive in an instant. Those who had sought refuge in their homes were now entombed within them, the very walls that promised safety becoming the instruments of their death. The air itself became a poison. It was thick and heavy, a soupy mixture of fine ash, pulverized rock, and sulfurous gases. Breathing became a conscious, painful act. Each inhalation brought a searing pain to the lungs and a fit of ragged, body-racking coughing. People tied tunics and cloths over their mouths and noses, but it did little to filter the fine particles that clogged the throat and strung the eyes. making vision in the lamplit darkness even more difficult. The smell of sulfur, the smell of the Earth's deep interior, was everywhere, a scent that many associated with the underworld, confirming their fears that this was a divine, apocalyptic punishment. To add to the horror, the eruption column itself was generating its own weather. Massive electrical charges built up within the churning cloud, discharging as colossal bolts of lightning that strobed through the darkness, momentarily illuminating scenes of pure chaos and devastation, and setting fire to the wooden balconies and upper floors of buildings that had not yet collapsed. The city was now being buried, crushed, and burned, all at once. As the long afternoon bleeds into a nightmarish evening, the city of Pompeii is a vision of hell. The darkness is absolute, broken only by the angry, pulsing red glow from the summit of Vesuvius, the flash of lightning, and the scattered fires consuming the town. The air is a choking fog of ash. The ground is a treacherous, shifting sea of pumice. The sounds are the unceasing roar of the volcano, the hiss of falling stone, the crash of collapsing homes, and the distant, fading cries of the dying. The vibrant, confident, living city of that morning is gone, replaced by a tomb in the making. The intricate tapestry of Pompeian life has been violently, irrevocably torn apart, and its people, whether fleeing in terror or huddled in their final, doomed moments of shelter, are now subjects in the final act of a tragedy directed by the full, impartial, and incomprehensible power of the natural world. To understand the true magnitude of the tragedy that befell Pompeii, one must first silence the echoes of its destruction. One must mentally strip away the thick, suffocating mantle of pumice and ash, and see the city not as a ruin, but as it was in the moments before the sky fell. It was a jewel of Campania, a thriving, vibrant city of some 12 to 15,000 souls, occupying a gentle slope that rolled down towards the sparkling bay of Naples. It was a place of breathtaking contrasts, where the rustic charm of a country market town blended seamlessly with the sophisticated urban planning and architectural grandeur of the Roman Empire. Its location was strategic, a commercial crossroads enriched by the volcanic soil of the mountain at its back and connected to the wider world by the sea at its feet. What lies preserved beneath the ash is not a ghost, but a perfect blueprint of Roman life, a city captured in its entirety, with its public grandeur and its secret, private moments held in suspension. The city was defined, first and foremost, by its walls. A formidable circuit of stone over 2 miles long, punctuated by at least 8 gates, encircled the urban area. These walls were ancient, far older than Rome's dominion over the region, dating back to the city's Samnite origins in the 4th and 5th centuries BC. Built from massive, carefully cut blocks of local tufa and limestone, they were a testament to an earlier, more warlike era. By 79 AD, with the entirety of Italy united under the peace of the Roman Empire, the Pax Romana, these fortifications had lost their military urgency. They no longer served to repel invaders, but rather to define the city's physical and administrative boundary, the Pomerium. The gates were no longer slammed shut against enemy armies, but instead served as points of entry for commerce, for farmers bringing their produce to market, and for travelers journeying along the coastal roads. Each gate had its own character. The Herculaneum Gate to the northwest was perhaps the grandest, a formal entrance that opened onto the road to Naples. The avenue outside this gate was famously lined with the elaborate tombs and monuments of Pompeii's most prominent families, creating a stately, solemn approach to the city, a place where the world of the dead greeted those entering the world of the living. Other gates, like the Stabian Gate to the south or the Vesuvius Gate facing the mountain, were more functional, clogged with the daily traffic of wagons and pedestrians. Once inside these walls, the city revealed itself as a marvel of Roman urban design, laid out on a rational grid. The streets formed a structured web, with 2 main east-west arteries, the Decumani, intersected by a series of smaller north-south roads, the Cardans. The most important of these thoroughfares was the Via della Bondanza, the main commercial street, a bustling spine that ran from the Forum in the west towards the Sarno Gate in the east. It was here that the pulse of Pompeian life beat strongest. The streets themselves were an innovation. They were paved with large, polygonal blocks of dark, durable volcanic stone, expertly fitted together. On either side ran high sidewalks, the crepidines, ensuring that pedestrians could walk elevated above the filth, rainwater, and animal waste that would collect in the street below. To cross these often mucky thoroughfares, Pompeians used one of their city's most iconic features: large, raised stepping stones, placed at intersections. These ponderer were spaced just so, allowing a pedestrian to cross without soiling their feet, while also permitting the wheels of a Roman cart to pass through the gaps. Over decades, the constant passage of these iron-rimmed wheels wore deep, parallel ruts into the hard stone, grooves that remain today as a ghostly trace of the city's ceaseless traffic. At the very heart of this urban grid lay the Forum. This was the soul of Pompeii, a vast, open rectangular plaza that served as the nucleus of the city's civic, religious, and economic life. Paved in elegant slabs of travertine stone and closed to all-wheeled traffic, it was a grand pedestrian sanctuary designed for public gathering. To stand in the Forum was to be at the center of the Pompeian world, surrounded on all sides by the institutions of power and faith. Dominating the northern end, with Vesuvius providing a dramatic natural backdrop, stood the majestic temple of Jupiter. As the city's Capitolium, it was dedicated to the supreme triad of Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, and symbolized the power and divine favor of Rome itself. Along the western side stood the Temple of Apollo, one of the oldest and most sacred sites in the city, its courtyard filled with statues and featuring a prominent sundial that marked the passing hours. Next to it was the Basilica, a colossal and versatile building that was not a church, but the city's law court and main hall of business. Its cavernous interior, divided by columns, buzzed with the sounds of legal arguments and merchants finalizing contracts. The eastern side of the Forum housed the Mausoleum, the bustling central market, its stalls overflowing with fish, meat, and vegetables. Next to it stood the serene temple of Vespasian, dedicated to the cult of the emperor, and the sanctuary of the public Lares, honoring the city's guardian spirits. The southern end was lined with the administrative offices of the city's elected magistrates, the functional engine room of Pompeian governance. Away from this monumental public center, the fabric of the city was a dense weave of private homes, workshops, and places of leisure. The most striking residences were the aristocratic villas, the domus. To step inside a home like the House of the Faun, which occupied an entire city block, was to enter a private kingdom of staggering wealth and refined taste. One would pass through a narrow entryway, the Fauces, perhaps crossing a mosaic on the floor with the word have, welcome, or in another house, the famous image of a chained dog with the warning caves CANEM, beware of the dog. This led into the atrium, the formal heart of the house. It was a large, semi-public reception hall, open to the sky through a rectangular aperture in the roof called the compluvium. Directly below, a shallow pool, the impluvium, collected the precious rainwater, which was then stored in a cistern below. The atrium was designed to impress visitors, its walls adorned with magnificent frescoes depicting scenes from Greek mythology, intricate architectural fantasies, or delicate natural motifs. Here, the master of the house, the paterfamilias, would receive his clients in the morning. Beyond the atrium lay the tablinum, his office, and further still, the family's private sanctuary, the peristyle. This was a large, open-air garden, surrounded by a graceful colonnade, filled with fountains, statues, fragrant flowers, and herds. It was a piece of the countryside brought into the heart of the city, a place of peace and luxurious seclusion. Of course, not all Pompeians lived in such splendor. The city was a mosaic of living conditions. A prosperous merchant might live in a smaller, but still elegant, domus that integrated his shop or workshop into the front of the building, facing the street. The vast majority of the city's inhabitants, however, the poor and the enslaved, lived in more cramped and modest quarters. Many resided in small, dark rooms at the back of workshops, or crowded into upper-story apartments, or cenacula, built above the shops and taverns, with their own separate entrances from the street. The lifeblood of the city was its commerce, and its streets were lined with workshops and retail outlets of every kind. Over 30 bakeries, or pastrina, have been found, their presence attesting to the city's love of bread. These were industrial operations, featuring large hourglass-shaped mills made of abrasive lava stone, which were turned by donkeys or slaves to grind grain into flour. The massive brick ovens of these bakeries have been found with their final batches of bread still inside. 81 carbonized loaves discovered in one bakery alone, each stamped with its maker's mark. Even more numerous were the thermopolia, the ancient equivalent of a modern fast food stand. These were ubiquitous, serving hot food and drinks to the masses. They are easily recognizable by their distinctive L-shaped masonry counters, which faced the street and had large earthenware jars, or dolia, embedded within them. These jars held hot stews, lentils, nuts, and mulled wine, ready to be ladled out for a quick, cheap meal. Many were brightly painted, like the famous thermopolium of Asalina, whose walls were covered with electoral notices and the names of the slave girls who worked there. Taverns and inns, or corpini, were also common, offering food, drink, and lodging, and often doubling as gambling dens and brothels. their walls covered in graffiti that speaks of prices, romantic encounters, and drunken quarrels. For entertainment and relaxation, the city offered facilities of a scale and sophistication that rivaled those of Rome itself. Near the Forum stood a dedicated theatre district. The large theatre, an open-air semicircular structure built into a natural hillside, could seat 5,000 spectators for performances of Greek and Roman dramas. Next to it was the smaller, roofed Odeum, a more intimate venue for concerts, poetry readings and recitals, prized for its superior acoustics. At the far eastern edge of the city stood the colossal amphitheatre, one of the oldest surviving Roman amphitheatres in the world. It was a massive elliptical arena that could hold up to 20,000 people, accommodating not just the entire population of Pompeii, but also spectators from surrounding towns. Here, the populace gathered for the brutal and wildly popular spectacle of gladiatorial combat and wild beast hunts, shielded from the sun by a giant, retractable awning called a velarium. This entire, complex urban machine was powered by unseen infrastructure. A branch of the Great Aqua Augusta aqueduct fed the city with a constant supply of fresh spring water. The water flowed into a main distribution tank, the Casella Maqui, located at the city's highest point near the Vesuvius gate. From there, a network of lead pipes running beneath the sidewalks distributed the water to the city's great public baths, to over 40 public fountains that provided free water for the poor, and for a hefty fee, directly into the homes of the super-rich. The city's walls also served as its public notice board. In the absence of newspapers, the stuccoed walls of buildings were a riot of communication. Professionals known as scripters painted election posters, programmata in bold red and black letters, urging citizens to vote for a particular candidate. Advertisements announced upcoming gladiatorial games, detailing the number of pairs of fighters and the promise of a sun awning. And everywhere there was personal graffiti, declarations of love, crude insults, snippets of poetry, and business accounts scratched into the plaster. The walls of Pompeii were alive with the voices of its people. To look at Pompeii before the fall is to see a city in perfect, dynamic equilibrium. It was a place of order and chaos, of immense wealth and grinding poverty, of sacred temples and profane brothels. It was a city where the engineering genius of Rome provided for the body with water, streets and baths, while art and culture provided for the soul in its theatres and frescoed homes. Every building, from the grandest temple to the humblest workshop, had its place in a dense, logical and deeply human urban landscape. It was this living, breathing, fully functioning organism, a city at the peak of its prosperity and confidence, that was frozen in a single, terrible moment, its intricate design and vibrant life sealed away as a perfect and poignant testament to all that was lost. To look upon the city of Pompeii is to see a marvel of architecture and engineering, but the stone, plaster and mosaics are merely the stage. The true life of the city, the vibrant and complex drama that unfolded daily within its walls, belonged to its people. Beneath the ash lies not just a city, but a society, captured at a single moment in time. This society was a microcosm of the Roman world, a complex and deeply stratified pyramid where every individual knew their place, yet many strove restlessly to improve it. To understand Pompeii is to understand the intricate web of relationships between the powerful elite, the industrious common folk, the ambitious freedmen, and the vast, unseen population of slaves who powered the entire enterprise. At the apex of this pyramid were the elite, the local aristocracy. These were the wealthy landowning families whose names appear again and again in inscriptions and on the grandest tombs lining the roads out of the city. Their wealth was primarily derived not from cash, but from land. The fertile volcanic slopes of Vesuvius produced some of the empire's most prized wines and olive oils. These families, like the Pompeii or the Caesarea, lived in sprawling, opulent homes, the domus, which were both private residences and public stages for the display of their status. The daily routine of a Pompeian aristocrat was governed by tradition and the pursuit of public honor. His day began with the salutatio, a formal reception where a stream of clients, lesser citizens, freedmen and dependents, would gather in his atrium to pay their respects, seek legal or financial assistance, and in turn offer their political support. This ritual was the glue of the social hierarchy, reinforcing the patriarch's power and prestige every single morning. Their ambition was channeled into the civic sphere. The highest honor was to be elected as one of the city's two ruling magistrates, the duumviri, or as an aedile, responsible for public works and markets. To achieve this, they practiced civic patronage, spending lavishly from their own fortunes to build or repair public buildings, sponsor gladiatorial games, or host magnificent banquets for the populace, their generosity advertised in painted notices on the city walls. Below this thin crust of the soup-rich were the plebs, the great mass of free-born Roman citizens. These were the bakers, the weavers, the potters, the tavern keepers, and the shop owners. They were the engine of the Pompeian economy, their lives revolving around their workshops and market stalls. While they lacked the immense wealth of the aristocracy, they were the vibrant heart of the city. They took pride in their work, joining professional guilds or collegia, which acted as social clubs, burial societies, and political lobbying groups. Their aspirations were more modest than those of the elite. To run a successful business, to own a small but comfortable home, to provide for their family, and to earn the respect of their neighbors. They were active participants in the city's noisy political life, their support courted by the elite, their opinions and endorsements loudly proclaimed in the graffiti that covered the city's walls. Perhaps the most dynamic and fascinating segment of Pompeian society was that of the freedmen, the liberti. These were men and women who had begun life as slaves, but had, through skill, luck, or loyalty, been granted their freedom through the formal process of manumission. A freed slave became a citizen, a status that granted them legal rights and protections, though they were barred from holding the highest political offices. Many liberti remained deeply connected to their former masters, continuing to work in their businesses or manage their estates, bound by a powerful sense of duty and gratitude, known as obsequium. But many others struck out on their own, and it is here that we see the remarkable potential for social mobility in the Roman world. Often highly skilled, and possessing a relentless ambition forged in servitude, freedmen frequently became spectacularly successful entrepreneurs. The most famous example in all of Pompeii is that of the Vettii brothers, Aulus Vettius Conviva and Aulus Vettius Restitutus. Believed to be former slaves, they rose to become enormously wealthy wine merchants. Their house, one of the most lavishly decorated in the city, stands as a testament to their success. Its walls are covered in vibrant, almost ostentatious frescoes depicting mythological scenes and cherubs engaged in various trades, a proud and public declaration of their newfound status. Their story, and others like it, reveals that while Pompeian society was rigid, it was not entirely static. Wealth could, and did, challenge the established order of birth. At the very bottom of the pyramid, forming its broad and essential base, were the slaves. They were ubiquitous, present in every workshop, every farm, and every home, yet they were legally invisible, considered property or talking tools, with no rights of their own. Their experience varied dramatically depending on their function. A trusted Greek slave, who served as a tutor to the master's children, or a skilled cook, who ran the household kitchen, might live a life of relative comfort, and even wield considerable influence within the home. In contrast, the life of an agricultural slave toiling in the vineyards under the hot sun, or a laborer performing grueling and dangerous tasks in a bakery's mill or a fuller's workshop, was one of relentless, back-breaking hardship. Slaves came from every corner of the Roman Empire, a testament to the city's multicultural fabric. There were Gauls, Germans, Britons, Syrians, and Egyptians, captured in war or purchased in the great slave markets of the East. This constant influx of foreign people, with their different languages and customs, made Pompeii a far more diverse place than one might imagine. For many, the only glimmer of hope was the prospect of manumission, the chance that through years of loyal service, they might one day earn their freedom and see their own children born as free Roman citizens. The women of Pompeii, like the men, occupied positions defined by their social class, but they were far from the silent, sequestered figures one might assume. The aristocratic matrona was the mistress of her household. While her husband operated in the public sphere of the forum, she commanded the private sphere of the domus, managing its complex finances, directing the legion of domestic slaves, and overseeing the education and upbringing of her children. While they could not vote, elite women were influential political actors. Electoral notices painted on walls show women enthusiastically endorsing candidates, and powerful individuals like the priestess Eumatia wielded immense public influence. Eumatia, a patroness of the Fullers' Guild, used her personal fortune to fund the construction of a massive, magnificent building on the east side of the Forum, a public declaration of her wealth, piety, and civic pride. Lower-class women, meanwhile, were vital parts of the economy, working as weavers, vegetable sellers, midwives, priestesses, and tavern keepers. Their lives played out not in the seclusion of a grand villa, but in the bustling streets and shops. This complex social structure was overlaid with a rich tapestry of multicultural influences. While the law, military, and official language were Roman, the city's cultural soul was deeply Greek. As part of Magna Graecia, southern Italy had been colonized by the Greeks for centuries before the Romans arrived. The Pompeian elite were often bilingual, speaking Greek as the language of culture and education. Their art, their theatre, and the mythological scenes that decorated their walls were all inherited directly from the Hellenistic world. But other, more exotic influences also found a home here. The most striking example is the beautiful and well-preserved Temple of Isis, located in the heart of the city. The cult of the Egyptian goddess Isis was a mystery religion that had become incredibly popular throughout the Roman Empire. Unlike the formal state religion of Jupiter and the Olympian gods, the cult of Isis offered a more personal and emotional connection to the divine, with elaborate daily rituals, a professional priesthood, and the promise of salvation and a blessed afterlife. Its appeal cut across class lines, proving particularly popular with women and freedmen, who were drawn to its message of hope and its vibrant, inclusive community. The presence of this grand temple, alongside shrines to the traditional Roman gods, shows that Pompeii was a place of spiritual diversity, a city where influences from across the Mediterranean could coexist and flourish. For the people of Pompeii, as for all in the Roman world, the divine was not a distant concept confined to one day of the week. It was a pervasive, tangible force that permeated every aspect of existence. There was no clear line dividing the sacred from the secular. The gods were woven into the fabric of the home, the marketplace, the political assembly, and the natural landscape. Religion was not primarily a matter of personal faith or moral doctrine, but rather a complex and vital system of rituals, traditions, and obligations designed to maintain a harmonious balance between the mortal world and the powerful, unseen forces that governed it. To live in Pompeii was to walk through a world animated by gods and spirits, a world where every action, from a business transaction to a family meal, was conducted under the watchful eyes of the divine. This constant negotiation with the gods was the fundamental insurance policy for daily life, aimed at securing prosperity, health, and above all, safety. The most visible manifestation of this relationship was in the grand public temples that dominated the city's skyline and anchored its civic heart, the Forum. Here, the state religion was performed with solemn pageantry. The most imposing of all was the Temple of Jupiter, rising on a high podium at the northern end of the Forum, its facade of towering columns creating a commanding presence. It was the city's Capitolium, dedicated not only to Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the king of the gods, but to the full Capitoline triad, which included his consort Juno, the queen of the gods and protector of women, and their daughter Minerva, the goddess of wisdom, craft, and strategic warfare. This temple was more than a place of worship. It was a potent symbol of Rome itself, a declaration of Pompeii's loyalty and its place within the empire. It was here that the most important state-sponsored sacrifices were made on behalf of the entire community, seeking divine favor for the city and its leaders. Just a short walk away stood the ancient and revered Temple of Apollo, its origins stretching back to the city's Samnite and Greek past. Surrounded by a graceful colonnade, the temple courtyard was a gallery of bronze statues, and its presence spoke to the deep Hellenic roots of Pompeian culture. Apollo was a multifaceted deity, the god of music, poetry, medicine, and prophecy. People would come here to seek healing from illness or to gain insight into the future. Yet the official patron deity of the city, the one whose favor was considered most essential for its prosperity, was Venus. As Venus Pompeiana, she was a localized and beloved version of the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility. Her sanctuary, the Temple of Venus, occupied a commanding terrace overlooking the sea, linking her dominion over feminine charm with the city's commercial success, which depended on the calm waters she was thought to provide. A crucial element of public religion was the imperial cult, a practice that fused patriotism with piety. Romans did not worship their living emperor as a god, but they did worship his genius, his personal guardian spirit, which was seen as a divine essence that guaranteed the well-being of the state. Deceased emperors who were deemed worthy by the Senate were officially deified, and their cults became an integral part of state religion. In Pompeii's Forum, a temple, likely dedicated to the genius of the Emperor Vespasian, featured a magnificent white marble altar. The altar's exquisitely carved reliefs depict a scene of public sacrifice, a priest with his head veiled, attendants leading a garlanded bull to be slain, and other figures playing pipes and lyres. This was the most significant public ritual, a solemn and bloody transaction designed to honor the emperor and secure the continuation of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. While these grand public ceremonies reinforced civic identity, the true heart of Pompeian religious life was found within the walls of the private home. Every household, from the most opulent villa to the most modest apartment, had a shrine known as a lararium. These could range from a simple niche in the wall with painted figures to an elaborate three-dimensional shrine built to resemble a miniature temple, often located in the atrium or the kitchen. Here the family honored the intimate, personal gods who protected their home and lineage. The most important of these were the lares familiares, a pair of ancestral spirits, usually depicted as cheerful, dancing youths in short tunics, holding a drinking horn. They were the guardians of the home itself. Alongside them were the penates, the spirits who protected the household's pantry and ensured the family would never go hungry. Presiding over them all was the genius of the paterfamilias, the divine spirit of the head of the household, represented as a toga-clad man making a sacrifice, or more commonly and mysteriously, as a serpent. The serpent was a powerful symbol of fertility, prosperity, and the continuity of the family line from one generation to the next. The rituals performed at the lararium were simple but frequent. Every family meal began with a small offering, a crumb of bread, a piece of fruit, a drop of wine, tossed into the small fire burning on the altar. On important family anniversaries, such as a birthday or a wedding, more elaborate offerings would be made. This daily, quiet communion was a constant affirmation of the family's reliance on their divine protectors. It was a deeply personal religion, far removed from the formal priesthoods and grand sacrifices of the forum, a constant, low-level negotiation to ward off sickness, bad luck, and harm. Pompeii was also a crossroads of culture, and its spiritual landscape reflected this diversity. Foreign cults found fertile ground here, offering a more emotional and personal form of worship than the formal Roman state religion. The most prominent of these was the cult of the Egyptian goddess Isis. Her temple, beautifully rebuilt after the earthquake of 62 AD, was an exotic oasis. Its walls were painted with scenes from Egyptian mythology, and a special underground cistern held water believed to be from the Nile. Isis was a compassionate, motherly goddess who had suffered and triumphed over death, and she offered her followers the promise of personal salvation and a happy afterlife, a powerful concept not central to traditional Roman belief. Her daily rituals were filled with music, chanting, and a professional, tonsured priesthood, creating an intense sensory experience that attracted a dedicated following, particularly among women and freedmen. Beyond the formal temples and household shrines lay a vast, murky world of superstition, omens, and magic. Pompeians believed the gods communicated their will constantly, and the world was full of signs for those who knew how to read them. The flight of birds, the shape of smoke from a fire, a sudden clap of thunder, or a dream could all be interpreted as omens, divine warnings, or encouragements. A person stumbling on the threshold of a house might abandon their business for the day, seeing it as a clear sign of bad luck. Priests known as augurs were specialists in interpreting these signs on behalf of the state, but individuals were constantly on the lookout for portents in their own lives. When omens were bad or a favor was desperately needed, people turned to votive offerings. Temples were filled with these small tokens of devotion, left by hopeful supplicants. A person suffering from an eye ailment might leave a small terracotta model of a pair of eyes at the temple of Apollo, the god of healing. This was a direct, transactional form of prayer. Do ut des I give so that you will give. In exchange for this humble offering, the god was expected to provide a cure. If the divine seemed unresponsive, or if one's goals were less than pious, there was always magic. Archaeologists have found cursed tablets, thin sheets of lead inscribed with a person's name and a vicious curse, which were then folded, pierced with a nail, and hidden in a grave or chasm to enlist the spirits of the underworld against a rival in business or love. To ward off such malevolence, as well as the more general danger of the evil eye, Pompeians relied on amulets. The most common of these was the phallus, a symbol of fertility and aggressive potency. Wind chimes or tintinnabula were often fashioned in this shape, their jangling thought to frighten away evil spirits. These symbols were not considered obscene, but rather as powerful protective magic, and they appeared everywhere, on street corners, over doorways, and worn as jewelry. For a Pompeian then, the world was a precarious place, balanced on a knife's edge between divine favor and divine wrath. Their religious practices were a complex toolkit for survival. a way of imposing order on a chaotic world and seeking protection from the constant threats of disease, poverty, and misfortune. Their relationship with the gods was contractual, built on a foundation of mutual obligation. By performing the correct rituals, honoring the household spirits, respecting the omens, and paying homage to the gods of the state, they hoped to maintain the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods. It was this peace that they believed guaranteed the continued existence of their world. When the earth began to shake, and the sky began to turn black, their first thought would not have been of geology, but of divinity. This was not a natural disaster. This was the catastrophic failure of that sacred contract, a sign that the gods, for some unknowable and terrifying reason, had finally turned their faces away. The ashen pumice that entombed Pompeii did more than just preserve a city. It sealed away a worldview. It captured a culture that embraced the sensual, the beautiful, and the physical with a candor and enthusiasm that can feel both familiar and strikingly alien to the modern eye. For the people of Pompeii, art was not a rarefied commodity to be viewed in a gallery, nor was the body a source of shame to be concealed. Instead, beauty was an essential ingredient of daily life, woven into the very walls of their homes, reflected in the careful grooming of their bodies, and expressed in an open and complex attitude towards pleasure, love, and desire. To walk through the city is to witness a world made deliberately beautiful, a society that sought to delight the eye and celebrate the full spectrum of human experience. This ethos is most vividly expressed on the walls of the city's homes. The frescoes of Pompeii are not mere decorations, they are immersive environments, transforming domestic spaces into galleries of myth, fantasy, and luxury. Over time, Roman artists developed a sequence of distinct decorative schemes, known today as the four Pompeian styles. The earliest, or first style, was an act of illusion, using painted and molded stucco to imitate the appearance of expensive, imported marble blocks. It was a statement of wealth, making a home built of modest local stone look as though it were clad in the finest materials of the Mediterranean. Following this, the second style broke through the walls entirely. Artists used sophisticated techniques of perspective to paint sweeping, illusionistic vistas, grand architectural panoramas, lush gardens, or dramatic scenes from Greek mythology that seemed to open up the room, creating a sense of boundless theatrical space. The famous frescoes in the Villa of the Mysteries, with their life-sized figures engaged in a mysterious religious ritual, represent the pinnacle of this style, drawing the viewer directly into the sacred drama. By the early days of the empire, a reaction set in. The third style turned away from illusionism in favor of a refined, delicate elegance. Walls were painted in large, flat fields of rich, monochromatic color, the deep, earthy crimson now known as Pompeian red being a particular favorite. Upon this dramatic canvas, artists would paint small, exquisitely detailed floating vignettes, like a tiny, perfect landscape or a scene from a myth, framed by impossibly slender, decorative columns. It was a style of classical restraint and understatement. The final phase, the fourth style, which was dominant at the time of the eruption in 79 AD, was a dynamic and often crowded fusion of what came before. It combined the large, flat color panels of the third style with the illusionistic windows of the second, creating a vibrant, sometimes chaotic, collage of different artistic ideas on a single wall. The House of the Vetii is a masterpiece of this eclectic style. Its rooms a dazzling spectacle of mythological scenes, floating figures, and architectural fantasies, all designed to impress guests with the owner's wealth and cultural sophistication. The subjects of these paintings reveal what the Pompeians valued. Epic stories of gods and heroes from Greek mythology served as conversation starters and moral allegories, while tranquil landscapes and still-life paintings of fruit, fish, and game, known as xenia, celebrated the bounty of nature and the pleasures of hospitality. Art was not separate from life. It was the rich, colorful backdrop against which life unfolded. This appreciation for external beauty extended to the human form itself. The culture of the body was central to Pompeian life, nurtured in the public baths and perfected in the private boudoir. Ideals of beauty were clearly defined. For men, the ideal was a strong, athletic, and well-proportioned physique, honed through exercise in the palestra. For women of the upper classes, the most prized quality was fair skin, a visible sign that she was a woman of leisure who did not have to labor under the sun. Achieving this ideal required a considerable arsenal of cosmetics and a daily grooming ritual. Archaeologists have unearthed numerous small glass pots and containers holding the remnants of these substances. White lead and chalk were used as a foundation to lighten the complexion, while red ochre provided a touch of color for the lips and cheeks. Finely ground ash or antimony was used as eyeliner and to darken the eyebrows. Hairstyles for wealthy women were incredibly complex and served as a potent status symbol, their intricacy changing with the fashions dictated by the empresses in Rome. Elaborate arrangements of curls, braids, and buns were constructed by a specially trained slave, the ornatrix, and held in place with fine hairpins of bone or bronze and delicate hairnets of spun gold. To complete the look, a Pompeian woman would adorn herself with jewelry. Delicate gold earrings, necklaces of emeralds and pearls, and coiled bracelets in the shape of serpents, a symbol of fertility and protection, have all been found, many still worn by the victims of the eruption, poignant reminders of their final moments. This celebration of the body's beauty was intrinsically linked to a frank acceptance of its pleasures. The Roman attitude towards sex and desire, revealed so vividly in Pompeii, was not governed by concepts of morality or sin, but by social status and power dynamics. The key distinction was not between heterosexual and homosexual acts, but between the dominant, penetrative role and the passive, receptive one. For a freeborn Roman man, it was considered perfectly acceptable and natural to be the active partner in a sexual encounter with anyone of a lower social status, be they a male or female slave, a prostitute, or an entertainer. The act reinforced his dominant position. What was socially ruinous, however, was for a freeborn man to willingly take the passive role with another man, as this was seen as a forfeiture of his masculinity and social standing. This worldview is expressed in the famous erotic art of Pompeii, which has shocked and fascinated the world since its discovery. Explicit scenes of sexual intercourse were not confined to the city's brothels. They appeared in the private homes of the wealthy elite, in taverns, and in the baths. These images were not pornography in the modern sense. Their meaning was contextual. In a tavern, a painting of a couple embracing might simply be a light-hearted, earthy decoration. In an elite dining room, a scene from the myths of Jupiter's many amorous conquests could be a sophisticated and witty allusion to classical literature. The phallus, a symbol seen carved into street corners, hanging as a wind chime or worn as an amulet, was rarely seen as purely erotic. It was primarily an apotropaic symbol, a potent charm to bring good fortune and, most importantly, to ward off the evil eye. The city's main brothel, or lucana, offers the most direct insight into the commercial sex trade. It is a small, two-story building with 5 tiny, cell-like rooms on the ground floor, each containing a masonry bed upon which a mattress would have been placed. Above the doorway of each room is a small fresco depicting a different sexual position, which scholars speculate may have served as a visual menu of available services for a clientele that was often illiterate or spoke a different language. The walls are covered in a dense layer of graffiti, the raw and unfiltered voices of the brothel's patrons and workers. They are a record of prices, boasts of sexual prowess, declarations of love, and insults, providing a uniquely human and poignant chronicle of the fleeting, anonymous encounters that took place within these walls. Against this backdrop of commercial sex and casual encounters, the institution of marriage for the upper classes was a serious, pragmatic affair. A marriage was a contract, a strategic alliance between families designed to preserve property and produce legitimate children who could carry on the family name. The wifely ideal was pudicitia, or modest chastity, and the goal of the union was concordia, a state of harmony. And yet, personal inscriptions, letters, and poetry reveal that deep romantic love and abiding affection were also cherished ideals. The art and culture of Pompeii show us a society that could hold all these truths at once: the pragmatic marriage and the passionate affair, the sacred ideal of family and the frank acceptance of carnal pleasure. It was a world that did not compartmentalize life's experiences, but rather embraced them in all their messy, beautiful, and profoundly human complexity. The story of a city is written not only in its stones and its art, but in its flavors and its appetites. For the people of Pompeii, food was far more than mere sustenance. It was the fuel of the urban machine, a cornerstone of the economy, and the central stage for social ritual. The volcanic soil that would one day become their tomb was, for centuries, the source of their agricultural wealth, producing in abundance that fed both the humble laborer and the extravagant aristocrat. From the simplest loaf of bread bought warm from a corner bakery, to the most theatrical banquet served in a lavish dining room, the food culture of Pompeii reveals a society of stark contrasts, and a palate that prized strong, savory flavors. The eruption of Vesuvius, in its terrible power, created an extraordinary archaeological menu, preserving the carbonized remains of the city's last meals and allowing us to taste, in our imaginations, the world that was lost. The foundation of the Pompeian diet, the daily fuel for the vast majority of its population, was bread. The city was home to more than 30 bakeries, or pistrina, testament to the central role of this staple. These were not quaint shops, but industrial operations where large, hourglass-shaped mills, hewn from rough volcanic stone, were turned by the brute force of donkeys or slaves to grind wheat and spelt into flour. The resulting bread was typically a dense, round, and rather coarse loaf, scored into 8 sections for easy tearing. For the poor, this bread, perhaps supplemented with a little cheese or a handful of olives, would constitute an entire meal. While the wealthy could afford finer white loaves made from sifted flour, it was the humble, hearty bread of the common folk that truly fed the city. Alongside bread, the diet was built on other grains and pulses. Porridge or pawls made from cooked spelt or barley was a staple dish, an ancient and simple food that had sustained Romans for centuries. Lentils, chickpeas and beans were also vital sources of protein, often cooked into thick, warming stews. Thanks to the fertile Campanian countryside, the Pompeian table was rich with fruits and vegetables. The frescoes in their homes and the remains found in their drains and kitchens paint a picture of abundance. Figs, grapes, pears, plums and peaches were grown locally and consumed in great quantities. Cabbages, lettuce, onions and garlic were staples of the kitchen garden. The olive was particularly cherished, a true cornerstone of Mediterranean life. Olive oil was not just the primary source of dietary fat, used for cooking and dressing food, but it was also the fuel that lit their lamps and the cleanser that, when scraped from the skin with a strigil, cleaned their bodies after a session at the baths. For many of Pompeii's inhabitants, especially those living in cramped upstairs apartments without their own hearths, cooking at home was not an option. Daily life was therefore reliant on the city's vibrant street food scene. The most common feature of this scene was the thermopolium, a fast food counter that served as a social and culinary hub for the working class. Here, a hungry craftsman or laborer could get a quick, cheap and hot meal. The proprietor would ladle food from the large earthenware jars, or dolia, which were set into the masonry counter. The recent excavation of one such establishment in Reggio V has provided an unprecedented look at a typical menu. Analysis of the remains within its dolia revealed traces of pork, goat, fish and beef, as well as land snails, suggesting a hearty stew or pulse that mixed ingredients from land and sea. Duck bones found in one pot attest to a specific dish being prepared on that final day. Patrons would eat standing at the counter or sitting on a simple bench, washing down their meal with cheap, readily available wine. These thermopolia were often brightly decorated, their walls adorned with frescoes depicting hanging game, pitchers of wine, and even scenes from mythology, creating a lively atmosphere for their customers. The taverns, or corpini, were more focused on the consumption of drink, though they also served simple, salty snacks designed to encourage thirst. These were often rowdy, dimly lit places for socializing, gambling with dice, an activity that was officially illegal but widely practiced, and sometimes engaging the services of a prostitute. The graffiti that covers their walls gives voice to these establishments, with patrons recording their wins and losses, complaining about the watered-down wine, or praising the charms of a particular serving girl. 2 ingredients were fundamental to the Pompeian palate, providing the signature flavors of Roman cuisine: wine and garum. The slopes of Vesuvius were covered in vineyards, and Pompeii was a major production and trading hub for wine. It was consumed by all social classes, at all times of day. Roman wine, however, was very different from its modern counterpart. It was thick, syrupy, and incredibly high in alcohol content. It was almost never drunk neat. To do so was considered the mark of a barbarian. Instead, it was always diluted with water, often served warm in the winter months, and frequently spiced with herbs or sweetened with honey to create a drink called mulsum. Even more essential was garum, the ubiquitous Roman fish sauce. This was the ketchup, soy sauce, and salt of the ancient world, a condiment used in almost every savory dish to provide a powerful, salty, umami flavor. It was produced by layering small, whole fish like anchovies with fish entrails, blood, and large quantities of salt in great vats. This mixture was then left under the hot Mediterranean sun for several weeks to ferment, the enzymes from the fish guts breaking down the flesh into a thick, protein-rich liquid. The resulting brown sauce was potent and pungent, and its production created a considerable stench. Pompeii was a famed center for the garum industry. one of its most successful producers, a man named Aulus Umbricius Scaurus, became fabulously wealthy from the trade. His personal brand was a mark of quality, and his name has been found stamped on the small clay jars used to transport the sauce, which have been discovered as far away as modern-day France. While the common citizen made do with bread and stew, the elite of Pompeii expressed their status through extravagant dinner parties known as the cena. These were not merely meals. They were highly theatrical performances of wealth, power, and sophistication. The setting was the triclinium, a formal dining room containing 3 wide couches arranged in a U-shape around a small central table. Guests, who were always male in the most formal settings, did not sit but reclined on their left side, propped up on cushions, a posture of leisure and luxury adopted from the Greeks. A proper cena was a multi-course affair that could last for hours. It began with the gustatio, an appetizer course that might include eggs, shellfish like oysters, and salads, accompanied by a honeyed wine. This was followed by the main courses, the mensae primi, which featured a succession of elaborate meat and fish dishes. The evening culminated in the mensae secondi, or dessert, which consisted of fruit, nuts, and sweet cakes. The goal of the host was to dazzle his guests with the exoticism of his ingredients and the ingenuity of his chef. The more expensive, rare, and difficult to obtain the food, the more prestige it conferred. A truly magnificent banquet might feature delicacies such as roasted dormice glazed with honey and poppy seeds, the tongues of flamingos, or the brains of peacocks. Chefs were masters of illusion, creating elaborate dishes designed to trick the eye. A whole pig might be brought to the table, which, when sliced open, would release a flock of live thrushes. Fish might be cooked in such a way that one half was roasted and the other boiled. Between courses, guests would be entertained by musicians, acrobats, dancers, or recitals of poetry. The cena was a battlefield of social ambition. It was where political alliances were solidified, business deals were broked, and reputations were made or broken. The quality of a man's food, the vintage of his wine, and the skill of his entertainers were all carefully scrutinized, powerful statements of his position in the city's competitive social hierarchy. The food of Pompeii, then, tells a tale of 2 cities. One of simple, functional nourishment consumed in the bustling streets and taverns, and another of theatrical, competitive indulgence practiced in the quiet, luxurious dining rooms of the elite. The relationship between Pompeii and the mountain that loomed over it was ancient, intimate, and profoundly misunderstood. For centuries, Vesuvius was a silent, green guardian, its slopes providing incredibly fertile soil for the vineyards that were the lifeblood of the local economy. The city itself was built from the mountain's past gifts. Its streets paved with dark volcanic stone, its strong concrete walls bound with volcanic sand, or pozzolana. The people of Pompeii lived in a landscape shaped by geology, their prosperity a direct consequence of the very forces that would one day seal their doom. They were not, however, ignorant of the Earth's power. They lived in a region where the ground frequently trembled, but their experience had taught them to see this restlessness as a familiar, manageable danger, entirely separate from the dormant, peaceful mountain that they had no reason to fear. This confidence was violently shaken on the 5th of February in the year 62 AD. On that day, a devastating earthquake ripped through the entire region of Campania. The Roman writer and philosopher, Seneca the Younger, provided a vivid account of the event, describing widespread destruction not only in Pompeii, but also in the neighboring city of Herculaneum. He wrote of buildings splitting apart, of statues toppling from their pedestals, and of a profound and universal panic that gripped the populace. The ground shook with such violence that parts of Pompeii were, in his words, swallowed up. He even recounted a chilling detail. A flock of 600 sheep had been killed in the countryside, not by collapsing structures, but by what he termed pestilential vapors, a phenomenon we now understand as the release of toxic carbon dioxide from the ground, a clear sign of deep magmatic activity. The damage to Pompeii was catastrophic. The Forum was heavily damaged, temples crumbled, and private homes were rendered uninhabitable. The event was a profound trauma, a deep wound inflicted upon the city's physical and psychological landscape. In the aftermath, many wealthy families abandoned Pompeii, relocating to safer villas elsewhere in Italy. But many more remained, their lives and fortunes too deeply invested in the city to leave. And so began a period of immense and energetic rebuilding. The 17 years between this great earthquake and the final eruption in 79 AD were years of constant construction. The city became a vast building site. The evidence is still visible everywhere for those who know where to look. A fractured wall, crudely patched with new plaster, a magnificent fresco from an earlier era, cracked and misaligned by the tremor, scaffolding still attached to the walls of a temple, and piles of building materials, lime, sand and stone, left in the courtyards of homes, ready for work that would never be completed. The popular Temple of Isis, for instance, was one of the first structures to be beautifully and completely rebuilt, funded by the family of a prominent freedman, a sign of both the resilience of the community and the changing social dynamics in the quake's aftermath. The Pompeians, in rebuilding their city, drew upon centuries of Roman architectural and engineering genius. Roman builders were masters of practicality and durability, and their techniques were, in many ways, well suited to a seismically active environment. While the grand public buildings were often made of solid stone or brick-faced concrete, much of the city's residential and commercial architecture utilized a method called opus craticium. This was a form of timber framing, a wooden skeleton with the spaces between the beams filled with a mixture of rubble and mortar. This technique was not only cheaper and faster than building with solid masonry, but it also provided a crucial degree of flexibility. During an earthquake, a timber-framed building could sway and bend, absorbing the energy of the tremor without shattering, a quality that often makes such structures more resilient than their rigid stone counterparts. For more substantial walls, Roman engineers perfected the use of concrete. Their concrete, a mixture of lime mortar, water, and volcanic sand, was incredibly strong and durable. It was used as the core for walls faced with other materials. In the technique known as opus incertum, the wall was faced with irregular, hand-sized stones, creating a rustic but effective surface. A more refined version, opus reticulatum, used small pyramid-shaped blocks of tufa set in a precise, diamond-like pattern, a hallmark of early imperial construction. These methods created walls that were essentially single, monolithic structures, strong and cohesive. This mastery of materials was complemented by the structural genius of the arch and the vault. By using arches, Romans could span wide openings and support immense weight, a principle essential for their aqueducts, bridges, and the grand entrances to their amphitheaters. Vaulted ceilings, found in the city's bathhouses, not only created large, open interior spaces, but were also structurally sound. The Pompeians were not living in fragile huts. They were living in a well-planned, robustly engineered city, a testament to Roman ingenuity. Why then did this strong, resilient city fail so catastrophically? The answer lies in a fatal mismatch between the threat they prepared for and the one that actually arrived. All of their engineering knowledge, all of their experience from past earthquakes, had conditioned them to resist lateral, shaking forces. They built walls to withstand being pushed from side to side. They had no concept of, and therefore no defense against, the unique and overwhelming forces of a large-scale Plinian eruption. The primary agent of destruction in the first 18 hours of the eruption was not shaking, but immense, crushing weight from above. The eruption column that rose miles into the sky rained down a constant torrent of lightweight pumice and heavy ash. Hour after hour, this material accumulated on the city's roofs. A flat or gently sloping Roman roof, typically constructed with heavy wooden beams covered by even heavier terracotta tiles, was designed to bear its own weight and shed rainwater. It was never intended to support the astronomical load that began to pile up on it. A cubic meter of compacted volcanic ash can weigh more than a ton. As the deposit deepened, 1 foot, then 3 feet, then 6 feet and more, the weight became unbearable. The sound of groaning, splintering timber became another terrifying note in the eruption symphony. Then came the crash. Roof after roof gave way, imploding under the strain, and instantly burying anyone who had sought shelter below. The very structures that were meant to provide safety became deadly traps. The flexible opus craticium walls that might have survived an earthquake offered no protection from being pulverized from above. For those who survived this first phase, a far more terrible and utterly unsurvivable force was to follow. In the later stages of the eruption, the massive column in the sky, having lost its upward momentum, collapsed upon itself. This generated a series of pyroclastic surges, incandescent, ground-hugging avalanches of superheated gas, ash, and rock fragments, moving at hurricane speeds of hundreds of kilometers per hour, and with temperatures exceeding 300 degrees Celsius. These surges were the eruption's true death blow. No structure built by human hands in the ancient world could have withstood such a force. It was not a force that pushed or crushed. It was a demonic wave of heat and energy that obliterated everything in its path. It instantly incinerated any living thing, boiled the moisture from bodies, and left its victims in a state of thermal shock. This was not a power to be engineered against. It was a power beyond the scope of their imagination. The story of Pompeii's engineering is therefore one of tragic irony. The people of the city were not passive victims of a geological quirk. They were active, innovative, and resilient. They had faced a massive natural disaster in 62 AD and had responded with confidence and ingenuity, rebuilding their city to be as strong, if not stronger, than before. They believed they had mastered their environment, but they were preparing for a familiar enemy. Their destruction came not from a failure of their knowledge, but from the limits of their experience. The mountain they thought they knew held a secret power of a type and scale they could not comprehend. Their well-built city, a monument to their ability to tame the earth, was ultimately erased by a geological force that operated on a completely different order of magnitude, a humbling and timeless lesson on the profound and unpredictable power of the natural world. For nearly 17 centuries, the city of Pompeii slept. Buried under a thick shroud of pumice stone and fine ash, its existence faded from memory into myth. The very course of the Sarno River had been altered, the coastline pushed outwards. The landscape that had once been so familiar became alien, and over the generations, farmers cultivated new vineyards and orchards on the rich soil above the forgotten city. Locals referred to the area vaguely as La Civita, the city, a place of old legends and rumored treasure, but its true name and identity were lost to time. It lay in a state of perfect preservation, a silent, subterranean world waiting for the moment it would be reawakened. The first, fleeting glimpse into this lost world came at the very end of the 16th century. The renowned Italian architect Domenico Fontana was tasked with engineering an underground canal to divert water from the river Sarno to a private villa. In the course of his digging, his workmen's shovels struck ancient walls covered in paintings and uncovered fragments of inscriptions. One of these even bore the name of Pompeii. Inexplicably, Fontana failed to grasp the magnitude of his find. Perhaps dismissing them as the ruins of a minor villa, he ordered the discoveries to be reburied, and the city's secret was once again sealed away. For another 150 years, Pompeii slumbered on, its rediscovery tantalizingly close, yet deferred. The city's true reawakening began in the 18th century, driven by the ambitions of a new royal dynasty. Naples was under the rule of the Spanish Bourbons, and its king, Charles III, along with his queen, Maria Amelia of Saxony, possessed a fervent passion for classical antiquity. Their interest was first ignited by the accidental discovery of nearby Herculaneum in 1738. Well diggers had stumbled upon the upper tiers of its theatre, leading to an organized, if chaotic, royal excavation. Herculaneum, however, presented immense challenges. It was buried much deeper than Pompeii, and under a dense, cement-like layer of hard volcanic tuff created by the pyroclastic surges. Excavation was slow, difficult, and dangerous, conducted primarily by digging a network of tunnels through the rock-hard material. Spurred by the treasures emerging from Herculaneum, the king commissioned a Spanish military engineer, Joaquin d'Alcubierre, to survey the surrounding region for other buried sites. In 1748, while investigating the area known as La Civita, Alcubierre's men struck pay dirt. They quickly unearthed the city's amphitheatre and the grand residence known as the Villa of Julia Felix. Unlike Herculaneum, this site was buried under a relatively shallow layer of soft pumice and ash, making excavation far easier. Though they did not yet know its name for certain, they had officially rediscovered Pompeii. The early methods of excavation, however, would horrify a modern archaeologist. Alcubierre was an engineer, not a scholar, and his approach was that of a treasure hunter. His primary objective was not to understand the ancient city, but to extract its most beautiful and valuable artworks to decorate the new royal palace at Pompeii. His teams dug tunnels and shafts, burrowing into buildings from the side or above. When they encountered a frescoed wall, they would crudely cut the painting out, often with little regard for the surrounding structure. Mosaics were pried from the floors, and bronze and marble statues were hauled away to the royal collection. Anything deemed of lesser value, common pottery, iron tools, skeletal remains, or frescoes considered repetitive or of poor quality, was often smashed, ignored, or used as backfill to close up the tunnels. This was a period of frantic and destructive discovery, a race to plunder the city's artistic treasures, with little to no thought given to the precious historical context being destroyed in the process. This approach drew the sharp criticism of influential scholars like Johann Joachim Winckelmann, a German art historian often considered the father of modern archaeology. Winckelmann argued passionately that the value of these discoveries lay not just in their beauty, but in their context. He advocated for a more systematic approach that sought to understand the site as a whole, preserving buildings and their contents together to learn about ancient life. His ideas helped to slowly shift the focus of the Pompeii excavations from a royal treasure hunt to a more scholarly enterprise. When the French took control of Naples for a brief period in the early 19th century, the new regime, influenced by Enlightenment ideals, poured more resources into the project, promoting a more open style of excavation that began to clear entire streets and houses, revealing the city's layout for the first time. The most revolutionary transformation in the excavation of Pompeii, however, came in 1863 with the appointment of a brilliant Italian archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli as director of the site. Fiorelli recognized that the true treasure of Pompeii was not its art, but the city itself, a perfect, frozen moment of Roman life. He immediately put a stop to the haphazard digging and instituted a methodical, scientific approach that would define the field of archaeology for the next century. He divided the city into the grid system of 9 regions, each subdivided into insulae, or blocks, which are still used for cataloguing finds today. This allowed for the precise location of every single object to be recorded. Most importantly, Fiorelli abandoned the practice of tunneling. His teams began excavating from the top down, carefully removing the layers of ash and pumice as one would uncover a delicate fossil. This method preserved not just the buildings, but the exact position of every object inside them as they were on that fatal afternoon in 79 AD. A cooking pot was found still sitting on a hearth. A set of surgical tools was laid out in a doctor's house. Coins were discovered scattered on a tavern counter. The city was no longer just a source of museum pieces. It was becoming a complete, three-dimensional snapshot of a lived reality. It was during this meticulous process that Fiorelli made his most famous and poignant discovery. His workmen often found strange, hollow cavities in the hardened layers of ash. For years, these had been ignored or broken through, but Fiorelli realized what they were. As the bodies of the victims and other organic materials like wooden doors or furniture were covered by the ash, they had eventually decayed, leaving behind a perfect, detailed void in the surrounding volcanic material. He devised a simple but ingenious technique to reclaim these lost forms. His workers would carefully clear an area, and upon finding a void, they would pour liquid plaster of Paris, or gesso, into it through a small hole. After the plaster hardened, the surrounding shell of ash was carefully chipped away. What was revealed was a perfect cast, a hauntingly detailed statue of a person at the exact moment of their death. These casts captured the final, desperate gestures of the victims. A man covering his face with his hands, a mother shielding her child, a dog writhing on its back, its collar and lead still visible. Fiorelli's technique gave a face to the tragedy as never before, transforming the victims from anonymous skeletons into real, suffering human beings. Thanks to these evolving methods, the discoveries from Pompeii have provided an unparalleled, high-resolution image of the Roman world. The initial finds of stunning frescoes, intricate mosaics like the Great Alexander mosaic from the House of the Faun, and beautiful sculptures fueled the neoclassical movement across Europe, influencing art, fashion, and design for generations. But it is arguably the more mundane objects, uncovered by the careful, later excavations, that have taught us the most. We have found carbonized loaves of bread, still sitting in a bakery's oven, jars of wine and the savory fish sauce, garum, entire sets of bronze and glassware, tools from a carpenter's workshop, and the inkwells and styluses of a clerk. These everyday items have allowed us to reconstruct the daily routines, the diet, the commerce, and the social life of the city in breathtaking detail. The lost city, entombed for so long, had finally been found, and its treasures, both artistic and humble, would forever change our understanding of the ancient world. The story of Pompeii does not end in 79 AD. The moment the city was buried, its second, and perhaps more enduring, life began. For the 17 centuries it lay dormant, it was a lost world. But since its reawakening, Pompeii has become more than just an archaeological site. It has become a potent and persistent idea in the modern imagination. It is a cultural touchstone, a place of pilgrimage, and a powerful symbol that has shaped our art, our literature, and our very understanding of the past. This second life, with its own triumphs and challenges, is the final chapter in the city's extraordinary legacy, a story of how a place, by dying, achieved a strange and profound immortality. When the first treasures of Pompeii and Herculaneum were brought to light in the mid-18th century, they sent a shockwave across Europe. For the wealthy young aristocrats undertaking the Grand Tour, the educational journey through the classical heartlands of Italy, a visit to the excavations near Naples became an essential and awe-inspiring experience. They returned home with sketches, souvenirs, and minds filled with the elegant, refined aesthetic of the buried city. This direct exposure to a perfectly preserved Roman world ignited the neoclassical movement. The graceful frescoes, with their slender figures and rich, earthy colors, were copied onto the walls of English country houses and French salons. The delicate forms of Roman furniture, tripods and candelabras were emulated by designers like Robert Adam. The classical motifs seen in Pompeian mosaics and pottery were famously adapted by Josiah Wedgwood for his iconic ceramics. Pompeii provided an authentic, direct-from-the-source look at classical style, and its aesthetic became the height of fashion for a generation. Beyond interior design, the city captured the romantic and tragic imagination of writers and artists. In 1834, the English author Edward Bulwer Lytton published his novel, The Last Days of Pompeii. The book, a dramatic tale of love, intrigue, and religious conflict set against the backdrop of the erupting volcano, was a phenomenal international bestseller. More than any scholarly report, Bulwer Lytton's novel cemented the popular image of Pompeii, transforming it from an archaeological curiosity into a grand human drama. In the same year, the Russian painter Karl Bryullov unveiled his monumental canvas, The Last Day of Pompeii. The painting, a vast and terrifying spectacle of fleeing crowds, collapsing statues, and a sky black with ash, became one of the most celebrated artworks of the 19th century, drawing huge crowds wherever it was exhibited. These works and countless others in art, opera, and eventually cinema ensured that Pompeii's story was not just one of historical interest, but a permanent fixture in our shared cultural mythology, a ready-made stage for spectacle, disaster, and reflections on the human condition. This immense fame, however, has come at a great cost. Today, Pompeii is one of the most visited archaeological sites on the planet. Millions of people from every corner of the globe walk its stone-paved streets each year, drawn by the desire to step back in time. This popularity is a testament to the city's power, but it has also subjected it to a slow, creeping, second death. For 17 centuries, the volcanic ash provided a near-perfect, stable and anaerobic environment, protecting the city from the ravages of time. Since being excavated, its fragile structures have been exposed to the elements. Wind, rain, and relentless sun bleach the vibrant colors from the frescoes. Weeds and lichens take root in ancient masonry, their tendrils slowly forcing apart 2,000-year-old walls. The sheer volume of foot traffic erodes the original Roman paving stones and the delicate mosaic floors of the villas. Compounding these natural threats has been a long history of human error. Early, poorly conceived restoration efforts, often using modern cement that traps moisture, have caused irreparable damage to ancient structures. Decades of underfunding, mismanagement, and the sheer scale of the task left much of the city in a state of managed decline. The crisis reached a tipping point in 2010 with the sudden and shocking collapse of the House of the Gladiators, a structure that had stood for 2 millennia. The event served as a global wake-up call, a stark warning that Pompeii was crumbling. In response, a massive conservation effort, the Great Pompeii Project, was launched with European Union funding. The focus of work at the site has now fundamentally shifted. The age of large-scale excavation is largely over. The new priority is preservation, shoring up unstable walls, restoring damaged frescoes with historically sensitive materials, improving drainage systems, and using modern technology to monitor the site's condition. The battle is no longer to uncover Pompeii, but to save it from disappearing all over again. What, then, is the ultimate meaning of this city that has lived twice? What are we to make of this place of profound and unsettling dualities, of life and death, beauty and terror, preservation and decay? Pompeii is, perhaps, the world's greatest memento mori, a Latin phrase meaning, remember you must die. It is an undeniable and deeply humbling reminder of the fragility of human existence. The homes, the temples, and the bustling streets, all built with such confidence and permanence, were erased in a day. The lives of thousands, with all their complex ambitions and affections, were extinguished in an instant. The city forces us to confront the impermanence of our own lives, and our own civilizations, reminding us that we too live on a geologically active and unpredictable planet. Yet paradoxically, Pompeii is also a powerful testament to connection and continuity. By preserving the intimate details of everyday life, it collapses the immense distance of time and allows us to see ourselves in the people of the past. The love notes scrawled in an alleyway, the children's game pieces dropped in a garden, the half-eaten meal left on a counter. These are not the grand artifacts of emperors, but the familiar traces of lives not so different from our own. They reveal a shared humanity that transcends the centuries. We see their anxieties, their humor, their affection, and their daily routines, and we recognize ourselves. To stand in Pompeii today is to be suspended between these two realities. One can look up at the serene, green, and beautiful slopes of Vesuvius, the very same view the residents of the city once enjoyed. The mountain, the agent of such swift and total destruction, now stands as a silent, watchful guardian over the world it created and then entombed. The air is no longer filled with the sounds of commerce and conversation, but with a profound silence, punctuated only by the footsteps of modern visitors and the whisper of the wind through the ruined villas. In this silence, we can contemplate the final lesson of Pompeii. It is a story about the awesome and indifferent power of nature, but it is also a story about the resilience of human memory. It is a city that, through its complete and utter destruction, has been granted the power to speak more clearly and intimately about the past than any other place on Earth.